NBA season, every shot you take with Fanatics Sportsbook puts points on the board. Earn up to 10% fan cash on your bets, win or lose. So even if your bet misses, you're still scoring fan cash. Unlock the world of Fanatics with fan cash for exclusive rewards like authentic apparel, game tickets, and meeting legends at Fanatics events. Make the switch and turn every bet into a bucket with Fanatics Sportsbook. Winning hits different here. Welcome to the Putback presented by Fanatics. We are here with my friend and yours, Steve Popper, grizzled vet of the Knicks beat, and we're going to get into everything Knicks related over the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so. We're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to get into it as we always do, starting with the baseline. Knicks last night beating the Charlotte Hornets at home, improving to 11-1 at home, coming off a bad loss at Boston. Steve Popper was in there in person for both tilts. And Steve, what did you make of what you saw last night against Charlotte, given how the Knicks looked against Boston?
You know, it's really hard to judge. First, let's start with, do you have to introduce me as grizzled veteran every time?
It's a term of endearment.
We have to go to the old age. I think it's hard to take. You saw the bad sign that, again, big lead, and I know it's a game of runs, and we all say that, but Charlotte looked like such a disjointed team. Maybe it was being in New York, no Brandon Miller. They were in New York for a couple days, and the Knicks are on a back-to-back. But you get a team like that down, 27-12 after one quarter, you got to put them away right away. And maybe, barring a miss by the Hornets and Jalen beating the buzzer at halftime, you could be going in tied at halftime with that and give that team life. The Knicks took care of business. They didn't do it the night before. I think what they'd like to see and probably fans would like to see is the consistency. I don't want to bring back Tom Thibodeau stuff, but he used to talk about being a 48-minute team, and I think Mike Brown is talking the same thing now. They haven't been a 48-minute team. They've been building leads, showing glimpses of what they can be, and then you have these lapses where you just Josh Hart in the game in Boston called it that we just get stupidity, that we stop doing what we do well, and guys maybe try and get do things on their own. That's got to get fixed. I think an alarming or maybe a good sign is a minute and a half into the second half, there was a wide open layup for LaMelo Ball, and Mike Brown immediately called time and said, "This is just not who we are." And really, from that point on, is when the Knicks seemed to take over, wake up a little bit, and put this team away.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Mike talk about that after the game when you asked him about it, Steve. If I don't go grizzled vet, can I say something like Taj Gibson of the Knick beat? Your wisdom, we value it. We want you around. I think that's a pretty apt comparison.
The only problem with that comparison is no one listens to me.
If anyone listens to you, I listen to you, Steve. Again, here on the Putback, presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. Steve, you just broke down kind of the immediate future and what's going on with the team at the moment. Obviously, a big storyline before the game was an ESPN report on Giannis Antetokounmpo. Shams Charania saying that Giannis and his agent Alex Ratzis would speak with Milwaukee, speak with presumably the front office ownership about future with the team. You know as well as I know, Steve, if you have those conversations, usually doesn't end up in finding common ground moving forward. It usually ends up in one side moving on, and so it seems like just based on that report, it's a matter of time here. But let's see how this thing plays out. Obviously, Knicks would be in the mix there if it came to fruition. If he did ask for a trade, you touched on that in Newsday today. What can you tell us about what you're hearing?
Well, I think the first thing. Doc Rivers, Giannis have tried to kind of dismiss these reports. When we were in Milwaukee earlier this year, I think you asked the question of them, just kind of, is there truth to the talks and you talking about the Knicks and the interest this summer? And Giannis very much danced around the answer. He didn't say no the way Doc Rivers tried to last night. And even Doc's thing, saying he's never asked for a trade. Maybe he hasn't asked for a trade, but maybe he's having these meetings and saying, we've got to figure something out here. Either we make this work or we move on. Giannis is an amazing guy, an amazing player. Any team would be lucky to have him. Someone I spoke to at the Knicks basically said, you see these reports and it's just sort of like noise because you know how it is in the front office. They're doing the work every day. This is what they do. They wake up and they figure out scenarios and they pitch ideas, among front offices back and forth. Would this guy be available? Would you be interested in this guy? What do you think of this person? So the work is being done all the time. But I think the reality is just a really bad fit for how it would work for the Knicks right now. They just don't have the pieces that make sense. If you're the Bucks and whatever, say Karl Anthony Towns is the start of a deal, you're not winning with Giannis. Do you take a step back? If you're the Knicks, you've got a pretty good team right now. Do you give up 2-3 pieces of your rotation to make it, make room for a guy? Giannis is great. He's amazing. I still always feel like this is Jalen Brunson's team. He's sort of the Knicks Giannis. He's the leader. He's the captain. He's the guy everything's been built around. Do you take the ball out of his hands if you bring in someone like a Giannis? Everyone would love to have him, but you'd like ideally to draft him and not have to give up half your team to get him.
Right. I just want to actually hit this real quick, Steve, because you mentioned Jalen Brunson. I don't know, some fake trade, some Twitter fan speculation about Jalen Brunson. Would you trade him? It's not happening. The Knicks are not trading Jalen Brunson. They're not moving him anywhere. Yeah. If they do trade him, it will be another team president doing the deal. Leon Rose is not trading Jalen Brunson. So don't waste your time. Don't waste your breath on that being a part of any trade because it's not happening. And yeah, I think Steve
with good reason. He's not only a top 10 MVP guy, but he's clearly the sort of captain you've looked for 30, 40 years.
Yes. And we've been covering the team for a while, and my view is you're not here without him. So yeah, he's not above criticism, game to game criticism, but the idea that you're going to move him for anybody is absurd because he brought you here. Anyway, that's just how I see it. But yeah, he's not getting traded. The idea for Giannis, though, and whether he asked for a trade or he didn't, the Bucks don't talk to the Knicks over the summer without some kind of endorsement from Giannis. They're not just doing that based on nothing. So, yeah, it might be a semantics game with whether he asked for a trade or he didn't. For the Knicks, I know that they made a legit offer, what they felt was a legit offer over the summer. Not 1,000% sure which players were included, but they had the players in there to make the money work. Obviously, don't have a ton of draft capital, and it seems like a long shot still at this juncture because even if Giannis wants to be a Knick, he's got to either get Milwaukee to work with him to get him to his preferred destination, or he's got to saber rattle a little bit and tell teams that he's not signing an extension with anybody but New York. So if you trade for me, it's going to be a short-term deal. And without one of those two paths, I just don't see it because there's so many teams that could put together really good offers for Giannis. And I'm looking at the Hawks in part because Alex Saratzis, I think he made it a long way in their executive interview process before they decided what to do with their front office. So there's obviously connection there. But I just think the Knicks offer could be beat by so many different teams when you get down to the bottom line of this thing.
Right. And I agree with you. Look, the only leverage I think Giannis has is that extension. And when I think about leverage with Giannis, he's just not the guy. Like there are certain players, if they're not happy, you don't want them in your organization. Giannis is not that guy. I mean, he is. We talk about Jalen Brunson. He's that kind of guy. He's a leader. He's a stand-up guy. He's every day, has been part of that organization. And look, they've basically hired his whole family on the roster. They've taken care of him. He's taken care of them. I don't see this as being a sort of situation where he's going to hold them up or he's ever going to be a problem. He's just not that kind of guy. So I don't even think he has a lot of leverage. And if you're John Horst, the GM of the Bucks, and you're thinking I only have the Knicks, well, that's how Nico Harrison is unemployed right now. You
Yeah.
go out and you shop a player like Giannis for the best deal you can, and again, like I said, you can talk about Towns or Anunoby, whatever, or any one player from one team. If you're not winning with Giannis, unless you're getting Jokic or Doncic back as that one player, you better start building for the future and get a lot of pieces back, because that's if you're not winning with him, you're not winning with one other player. You need back a rebuild, and the Knicks can't do that.
And the funny thing to me, or interesting thing to me, is obviously Bucks acquiring Damian Lillard, and Damian Lillard wanted to be in Miami, was trying to make his way to Miami. Portland, Joe Cronin decided to do the best deal for the organization, and
Sure.
so you saw where he ended up, and you have to assume that Milwaukee would be thinking the same, regardless of where Giannis wanted or didn't want to go. But we're talking about things that may or may not happen, something down the road. They still have to get to that point. But if you're having the conversations, usually you're not ending up on the same page. Usually it's an exit strategy. I should say, though, too, that we're 20 plus games into the season. Just asking around about this yesterday, people in touch with the team said the Knicks like where they are. They like this group. They're not ready to, blow things up at this point. They want to see what they have here. They like the team. And so that's where we are, early December. Nothing could even happen until December 15th. But I think that's where it sits right now. The idea that he could or could not be a fit with this roster. Let's just say hypothetically, Karl Towns and OG Anunoby are going out, and you get Giannis back. And do you think that is good enough for the Knicks? Like, based on what they're left with, you think that's good enough? Let's throw Miles McBride in there too.
It's so hard to say. Like I think when we're speculating on these kind of things, Giannis is a great talent. He's a great guy. You'd like to think that he makes it work wherever he is, but like the trade you just suggested, you're giving up two key starters, all NBA talent, all defensive team talent, who also can score 20 a game, and McBride, who's a knockdown shooter. I don't see how. They spent a year basically trying to build depth on this team, trying to get a starting five that I think is the envy of most franchises, and building depth on the bench. I just don't see how you rip up that to bring in one player who look at right now, his injury 3 minutes into the game yesterday. And like I put it in my column, we all love Giannis, but he's played 12 years for the Bucks. They've got one title, and they've put some pretty good talent around him. There's no assurances when you make a deal, you're getting the parade. So to me, you've built this team. You believe this is the fit around Brunson. I don't see why you'd veer off this right now. If it's a 1-for-1, if they said, OG Anunoby for Giannis, maybe that's it, because obviously Giannis is a different level, a two-time MVP. Same thing with Towns, as great as he is as an offensive talent that seems to fit with what Brunson can do. You look at the defensive improvement of Giannis. I don't know. It's just, to me, these are all, it's all imagination until it happens. And I just don't, I'm just sort of maybe I'm too patient, but I'm like, you built this to be a certain way. And I just think there's too many question marks if you wind up pulling off something like this. And I don't think you pull it off anyway.
Right. And then, the other thing that happened yesterday, or maybe late the previous night, was Chris Paul and the Clippers agreeing to part ways. Chris Paul hasn't been waived. Clippers saying that they will work with him on his next steps. Obviously, messy, ugly divorce there for a player who thought he was on his farewell tour. And then the team just says, we want you to go home. There's been the Chris Paul Knicks thing for what seems like 15 years. But I'm told that probably not happening, nothing there at this point in terms of the Knicks trading for Chris Paul. I think there is a desire, or they're going to keep an eye on the point guard market, but Chris Paul is not considered an option at the moment. Your thoughts on just kind of where he could end up, but also the Knicks and their point guard situation behind Jalen Brunson?
Well, first, the thing that you said about 15 years, that's probably when you really wanted to get Chris Paul.
Yeah.
To think now at 40 years old that you're going to get him, and look, Ty Lue, I don't know him well personally, but every person I've ever spoken to in the league says he's a player's coach. He's the sort of guy you want to be partnered with as a player. If he's not talking to Chris Paul, if those reports are true, and that they haven't spoken for weeks, to me that says sort of the poison that you don't want. Chris has been a great leader. He's been an amazing player. He's a Hall of Famer whenever he steps away. But at this point in his career, what he can contribute on the court, I just I know people like leadership and stuff, but the Knicks have leaders. This is Jalen Brunson's team. I don't think they need Chris Paul coming in and an overwhelming presence as a guy who's a 10-minute a game player. It just doesn't make sense to me. If you could get me, also he's size-wise, he doesn't fit what the Knicks need. If you could get me a 6'5", defensive-minded, orchestrator as a backup point guard, all for it. But I don't want to, put him in any comparison to Chris Paul. But Tyler Kolek's been better this year. He's defensively, I think he's gotten a little stronger. He's gotten a little bit more skilled. He does orchestrate the offense well and has some of those qualities that you want with a 10-minute a night guy. I don't know that he's the answer, but if you could ideally get what I said, somebody with some size, somebody who can do those things, that'd be great. But doing it for a 6 foot 40-year-old who obviously has poisoned the well in LA and has been on, what is it now, 6 teams in the last 6 years, 5 teams in the last 6 years. It just doesn't make sense to me. I know we always talk about the relationships with Leon Rose and this being one of his guys. And there's always these, reuniting these guys. I just don't see how it fits here now. He's just, this is Jalen Brunson's team. They don't need a Chris Paul to disrupt that.
What do you see, deadline wise? Obviously, we're still 2 months away, 2+ months away. What are you seeing? What are you hearing deadline wise in terms of New York or elsewhere?
I mean, it's so. We've talked about this since the summer. What the Knicks have kind of done, pinned themselves in right up against the second apron. I think when you look at guys, you start looking at contracts. What could you move? The one thing I've been saying for years that we've seen with this front office is they don't like to lose a free agent for nothing. If they think they're not going to sign somebody, they'll make a move. That always makes me curious about Mitchell Robinson, who they've sort of wrapped in bubble wrap this year. Deuce McBride, the same thing. He's obviously worth more than they paid him, and his next contract is going to reflect that. These are decisions they're going to have to make in the future. So those are guys I keep an eye on as possible trade pieces. If you could upgrade that position. But I think really, to me right now, I think they're open to riding this out. What you said earlier, I've heard the same thing, that they're kind of happy with this roster. And I think they can piece it together. We talk about backup point guard. They have guys who they think can fill that role. Josh Hart plays minutes running the offense. Obviously, Brunson plays 35 minutes a night. McBride can do it in a pinch. Bridges can handle the ball and kind of orchestrate the offense. It's not, to me, it's not the need that I always go back to this. We're talking about backup point guard for 10 minutes a game. These are good problems to have. And I think unless something knocks on their door, I don't think that they're going to rush and make a bad deal.
Yeah. And I mean, the playoffs, Jalen Brunson's playing 40+ minutes. So
absolutely,
whoever you're getting is going to get probably decreased time in the postseason. So let's hit some injury updates, Steve. The big one is OG Anunoby taking contact in practice. Mike Brown continues to say we're not going to rush him. The last update, I think, was 3-on-3 and contact there, but there are different levels. to contact. I don't know what you've heard. I've heard that uh, this thing he could be back pretty soon. Like it could. There, I would say that like this weekend, next week, I don't think it is that far of a stretch based on where he's been earlier this week. That's kind of what I've been hearing lately. What are you hearing on OG?
I think it's more of a, to me, it's, you look at their sort of their track record. Casey Smith does not rush guys back. They take every precaution. And OG is a guy who's always taken those precautions. His reputation since he was in Toronto was a guy who, would not be back at 80%. He'd be back when he's 100%. They're getting along without him. To me, I could see them pushing this a couple of weeks. I'd be surprised if, I saw somebody kind of reporting that he could come back this weekend, but I'd be surprised. I just think they're going to err on the side of caution. That's sort of been the way they've been handling most of these. And a hamstring is not something you want to mess with. If you do it, early and you injure it again, you're talking weeks. To me, I'd play it safe and try and get through another couple of weeks and see what we're at. I think there's still, like what you said, the 3-on-3. Mike said last night about the contact. This progression, you've got to get him in full practices. You want to get full contact. You want to get him scrimmaging. I just don't see a rush here. I think it's, I'd be surprised if I saw him this weekend.
Patience with roster building, patience with hamstring injuries. You're consistent, Steve.
Us old guys have seen it. We sit in on a recliner and we just wait.
We're going to hit our sound off segment right now where we take a clip of something that was said in the locker room press conference setting. We talk about it. This one is from last night on Josh Hart, so let's hear it.
I know the truth. I would tell the truth, but I'm just asking this. Okay. Again, I rely on my staff, and I had reasons why I was starting it the other way, but my staff, I think all of them were like, hey, these are the reasons why it would be better. And the reality of it is I just listened to my staff. I said, okay, if I'm the only one thinking that the other way may be better at that time, then maybe I'm wrong. And I have been wrong before, and I will be wrong again in the future. And so, that's what I love about my staff is I have guys that aren't afraid on staff to tell me what I think. And now, at the end of the day, it's up to me to make the decision. I'm not going to always listen to them. But if my whole staff is telling me something, then I better open my eyes and my ears and figure out what they're really trying to say and maybe follow their lead instead of them following my lead all the time.
Yeah, that one stood out to me just because I guess the way that Mike Brown operates and the idea that he does keep his ears open and it's not, he's not closed off to what the staff brings to him. I think that just empowers guys and motivates guys to bring a lot to the table. And so I just thought that was interesting with regards to his style in terms of decision making. With regards to Hart as in the starting lineup, we talked about OG when he comes back, they'll have a decision to make. I believe Josh Hart remains in that starting role. You've seen him play so well recently, Steve, and I do think that that's the way they go. And then it's, Miles McBride, I guess, back to the bench, OG Anunoby starting. But what did you make of what he was saying there?
Well, I think two things. One, the big picture of the collaboration that we've all talked about since they were looking to hire a coach this summer. They wanted someone who was open to that. And he actually talked about this a little the day before also in Boston. We spoke to some players about it, that he has sort of an open door, open mind. And he said that there's been some situations where he invites everybody and the coaches, the video coordinators, and he listens. And he said he's had decisions, and I think this might be one of them, where everyone in the room is thinking one thing and he's thinking the other. And he's like, if I'm the only one that's thinking this, maybe I'm wrong. it's different than Thibodeau, but I think it's different probably than 90% of the coaches in the league, because most of them have got to have a strong feel for what they do. He seems very open to what he sees and what other people see, and listening and collaboration. I think in the Hart thing in particular, I wrote a column about this, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, with where Josh talked about, I'm an acquired taste. And I think his simple way of putting it was that he's a guy who you don't see on tape. Sort of, if you're watching just highlights, you don't see what he does for a team, what he does for his teammates. But they're a better team when he's with the starters, when he's with Jalen Brunson, when he's with Karl Anthony Towns, Bridges. He makes guys better on both ends of the floor. To me, that's a big part of this, that you have to see him every day to realize what he brings to you, because it's not highlight stuff. I think I wouldn't be surprised if the guys who are pushing for this move were the coaches who were here with him last year, who've seen it, whether it's Rick Brunson, Darren Erman, Maurice Cheeks, Mark Bryant, guys who've seen him every day do the things he does for a team. I think coaches, as they get to know him and coach him, realize how important he is.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting dynamic with when the decision was made, why it was made. But I think you see the results, Steve, is with Hart as a starter, and things going pretty well. And I'm not surprised, because we've watched it for a long time now. But it was Landry Shamet early on with getting a lot of minutes, and I think that he'll be back. I think he's going to avoid surgery. But Josh Hart seems to have taken that spot where you're getting the major minutes. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays itself out, but just to see Hart impact the game the way he has, given the minutes that he's getting, it just adds up in a sense. Another guy, big minutes, but does not get hurt ever, Mikal Bridges. I think we talked about the idea before the year that he just seemed comfortable and seemed like he was poised for a big year, an impactful year. I think you've seen that both ends of the floor. You were in Boston. What did you make of that scoring flurry? And does it surprise you when he goes off like that?
It's funny. A couple of us talked to him in the morning about being back in Boston, and was that the place during the playoffs last year where he admitted that he had an up and down season, and was struggling to find his way. He had those steals at the end of game 1 and game 2, and sort of you become a hero to the fan base in that. And he kind of dismissed it a little bit and just said, I think I help teams win, and when you help win, the fans will enjoy you. But you saw the confidence in a situation where, Boston is a tough place to play. I was joking around with somebody yesterday that might be the only place in the league that doesn't feel like a Knicks home game when you're on the road. Boston is Boston fans filling that arena, and it's a tough place to play. But he seems to flourish there, thrive there. And I think part of that is what the success that he had last year. I just think, whether it's the coaching change, whether it's a year of being in New York and playing with these guys, he just seems like more confident in his fit. He does seem to get lost sometimes in the shuffle, but I think there's times, Mike talked about it a little bit after the Boston game about just the aggressiveness he played with, and that they like to see that. They want to see that from him, where he's looking for a shot, feeling it, and really goes out and tries to take over a game at times. He has the talent to do it. He has the ability. It's sort of, people talk to me, is he the third option, fourth option, fifth option? And it's hard to say, because sometimes he becomes sort of invisible a little bit out there offensively. But he's a guy who can score 30 for you, and he's done it for the Knicks a couple times now. I think they'd like to see that more.
You saw that the shooting percentages on that graphic, 43% from beyond the arc. I mean, that's remarkable given where he was last year, struggles, especially early on, and a big bounce back year for Mikal Bridges. We're going to storylines now. Storylines presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. We're looking at the Knicks and the NBA Cup. Knicks qualifying for the knockout round. They're going to play Toronto in Toronto on December 9th. Odds for the Knicks to win the NBA Cup, they're currently at plus 700 to win the whole thing, with the Thunder leading the way at minus 120. New York's quarterfinal opponent, the Raptors, sit at plus 1,200. Be sure to check out the Fanatics Sportsbook app for all your NBA future bets all season long. Fanatics Sportsbook, winning hits different here. That Knick Raptor game, I think maybe you'll have RJ Barrett back for that one. So maybe that's a little bit of a different Raptors team. And, you know, certainly at home they've been tough. And I think even after that Toronto game, Jalen Brunson was talking about how, you know, that's a very good team and you know it's going to be a different group when you see them Tuesday. How do you see that matchup, especially based on what we saw earlier this week?
I think they are a good team. They've kind of surprised, I think, everybody in the league, the steps forward that they've taken. And it's, you know, it's RJ's played well. Quickly has kind of become what they had hoped he would be. And Scotty Barnes has started to become that sort of franchise player that they were anticipating when they moved out, you know, guys like Siakam and OG Anunoby. I think they're a tough team. They're a well-coached team. They play hard. They play physical. I think it's an interesting matchup, and it's funny when I was talking to somebody about Boston last night. You see teams that, you know, Orlando, Boston, who just come out and seem to play hard and physical, and it reminds me of the Knicks teams when they were kind of entering this era of, whether it was, you know, during Thibodeau's time and when they were with the hardworking, tough, you know, team you didn't want to play. Well, now they're a super talented starting lineup, and they're facing these teams, and you have to kind of be what you were. You have to still be that hardworking, hungry team to beat these kind of teams that come out and want to, you know, attack and hit you every time. I think that's sort of the next step that this team has got to take. The talent is undeniable, but they've got to consistently become that team that every night, you know, puts it out there and makes it a war. I think that's what people would like to see from this. And if they do that, I think they can beat anybody, whether it's winning the cup now or contending for a title.
Do you want to go to Las Vegas? Or are you rooting one way or the other? Knicks,
I do it all on weather. That's why I judge my entire life. And Toronto is not where I want to be. I looked at the Vegas weather. It's, you know, 60s. It's whatever. I'll take it, but I'm not a Vegas guy.
Yeah, I think
I like Deuce McBride's idea. Bring the European teams into this tournament and let's go spend 10 days in Italy.
That is a good idea. Yeah. Deuce, talented shooter, smart guy. I think Adam Silver needs to take a look at that. You do see the teams care a little bit more during the regular season about this thing. I'm not sure if it's here to stay. I'm not sure how much the general public cares about it, but I don't know. I've noticed that the guys approach these cup games during the regular season with maybe a little bit of different thought process, just based on what's ahead. Have you seen that too, or am I making it up?
No, I agree with you, and I think there's a couple of things. I think one, teams do take pride. The money definitely helps, and teams do look at that. You know, the prize money that's kind of brought it into light. But I do think there's things that have to be touched up here. I think every player I've spoken to complains about the courts. We first thought it was going to be the look of the courts, but everybody talks about that they're slippery and that, you know, any painted part of the court just seems to react differently to a normal court. And matter of fact, the Knicks also practiced down in Orlando on one of the glass courts that they're looking about bringing in the future for the All-Star game, and I think probably for some of these sort of tournaments. And players said they wanted no part of this. That it was, you just couldn't function normally like you do. To me, bring back the normal court, put a big trophy on it, you know, to make it clear what it is. But I think it's a good step forward. I think the real interesting part would be if you do what McBride talked about. And I think Adam Silver probably has an eye on it. Is making this a worldwide tournament. Having some when they do the NBA Europe eventually takes hold. I think they'd like this to spread out and be a tournament where you bring in international teams and play sort of an I guess European soccer to me looks like the way that the model that they're using for this.
Yeah. Let's get it overseas. So we'll see where it goes. But Steve, just a few other things before we get to the talk back with our buddy Matt Spenley. A couple notes around the league. Trade deadline again, 2+ months away. Minnesota. There's been a lot of reports about them looking for a point guard. I think they would prefer, I think, big name hunting. To go big name hunting. I don't know how many options are going to be out there. Trae Young, what's Atlanta going to do with Trae Young? I think that, it could be, I think that would be something that the Timberwolves would think about if it came to the point where Atlanta was going to trade Trae Young, but they're certainly looking for a point guard there. Dallas, you talk to teams, they're looking for some draft compensation, and I'm sure this is going to continue, but I know that there's been interest, calls made about Daniel Gafford and what they're going to do there. It's interesting. I would tear it down to the studs if I were them, but they keep signaling that Kyrie Irving is a guy they want to keep. They're not looking to move him, and those teams that are looking for point guards are certainly keeping an eye there. The last thing, Steve, is Sacramento obviously open for business. And I think Dennis Schroeder is going to get a lot of interest ahead of the deadline. And I would expect Sacramento to make a significant amount of deals. And Schroeder, he's a talented player and he can help teams. So I'm sure he's going to get a lot of calls, and I'm sure Sacramento is going to try to extract everything they can out of that. But what do you like as you look at this landscape? Who's going to be active? What are you looking at?
Well, I think you mentioned a couple of these. Every team struggling is where people go shopping. Yeah. We saw Schroeder last year in the postseason with Detroit. He can really be an impactful player. I think any contending team, that's a great spot to start. Sacramento is, a lot of teams, I think, small sample size that maybe they don't know what they are yet. Even Dallas, if you have a healthy Anthony Davis and if you think you're getting Kyrie back at some point, maybe they think differently about what they're going to be in a month or two than what they are now. But I think Sacramento, I think probably what we've seen from Chicago in the last month or so, I think we probably have to look at them, and they have a surplus of point guards. I think Indiana is another team that, how much do they hold on to knowing that next year they have Halliburton back and sort of are back into the mix again. I think it's interesting, but I think it's still early for most of these teams. I've heard the same as you, that Dallas kind of believes that they're still going to be better than they are now and are not doing a total sort of breakdown of everything, teardown. Although I keep hearing names. I haven't heard from Dallas, but I've heard people wonder aloud if they might move Anthony Davis at some point.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest name aside from the point guards that's going to be discussed. Speaking of discussions, the talkback, we answer some questions from the audience. They're relayed by my friend and yours, Matthew Spenley, the Big Spend. Matt, what do you have for us today?
What's up, guys? You'll be not surprised to hear at all that some of the conversation is centered around Giannis. So I want to start there. Let's paint a hypothetical first, completely hypothetical, to be clear for everyone, because this is part of the conversation, right? Obviously, the Knicks cashed in with Mikal Bridges, who we were talking about before, has been great this year. I want to ask you guys, hypothetically, if the Knicks did not make that trade, do you think that Giannis would be a Knick right now? Ian, I'll start with you.
That's a great question. I would say yes, and I would say yes. A couple of reasons, because they were going to use that draft capital for a big name player that they felt could really help them. Obviously, it ended up being Mikal Bridges, but if it wasn't, and you still have those picks, obviously when you talk to Milwaukee this past summer and you throw a bunch of those picks on the table, it's a different conversation. And so that's why I would say, yes, he would be here if the Bridges assets didn't go out the window to Brooklyn. But we just talked about how well Mikal Bridges is playing this year. So I think it's a little short-sighted to kind of write off that Bridges trade in the context of maybe not being able to get Giannis. But I do think, yeah, he'd be a Knick if they had that kind of draft capital to put on the table.
Steve, what do you think?
I agree. It's, they were, ever since Leon Rose took over this front office, they were building assets to go star hunting. And look, there's, Giannis is one of maybe 3 stars that you'd have on that list at the very top. So I do think that would happen. And, maybe everything is different then, because remember, I think that deal was made ahead of the Karl Anthony Towns trade. Maybe things are completely different. We're looking at a completely different roster then. I don't think, as Ian said, I don't think there's any regrets. I always think that those picks are overblown in retrospect now for what the Nets got for it. The Knicks think that they're going to be pretty good for the majority of this. And the ones that maybe where they're, back settled down and those picks are high, I think the front office probably thinks they may be on a beach somewhere by then and not really worried about where those picks land.
Seems to go that way. All right. One more on Giannis, Ian from Shiz86. And you can feel free to pass on this question because I know you talked about it before. Any insight to the offer that the Knicks made over the summer for Giannis when there were some discussions about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 1,000% sure, so I don't want to put anything out there. I just know that this was not, again, they didn't put the 6 to 10, the rotation guys, number 6 to 10 on the table and a bunch of second round picks. It was a real thing, a real offer, and they made the math work. I just not there yet on if I'm 1,000% on what exactly it was. So I that's all I could give you, Shiz, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah, I was going to say I never heard a definitive, but I think we can logically assume that Mikal Bridges was someone they were always considering there because that's why they held off on the extension. Sort of the timing seems to work that you don't extend him until you know that you're out on Giannis.
Yeah, and given the money and given what we said before about Jalen Brunson, I think you can kind of connect the dots and see what generally a deal would look like. I'm going to touch on something too. I know you guys talked about earlier, but I want to circle back around from F. Reed. Not including Giannis, are you aware of any players that are looking to be added to the team after December 15th? The Knicks need a big wing IMO. I think a lot of NBA teams would like a big wing on their team. But I know we talked about it for you guys as the Knicks evaluate their roster. I know we also got a question from Vic. Let's forget about Giannis. What position do we need more, a backup center or a backup point guard? So to talk about the big man too, just in terms of what the Knicks might need to add, Steve, why don't I start with you on this one? What do you think?
I think, first of all, I'll say this. I've heard the same thing as Ian's heard, that they're pretty happy with the roster and want to see how this builds out. Every year for them seems like it's been a lot of change, whether it's, the trades, the deals last year for Bridges and for Towns, and this year the coaching change and some of the guys they brought in. I think they think that they have enough. So we sit here and say, they want this backup center, this backup point guard. I don't know that it's as desperate as anybody seems to be presenting it. I think that there's a belief in the room that they have enough to contend. Do they have enough to be Oklahoma City? I always kind of say that you put yourself in the mix to be a contender, and then you roll the dice because, there can be injuries, somebody else. We look at Oklahoma City as unbeatable. Are they one hamstring away from not being, to me it's, and look at what Indiana did to them last year and the threat they were to them. Nobody's unbeatable in this league. We're all sort of like one calf muscle, one hamstring away from, opening the door for other teams.
Ian, what do you think about the roster?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I look at the backup point guard spot only because of the Malcolm Brogdon signing before the season, the idea that he was going to have that spot, and then obviously it didn't pan out, but it tells you that at the very least they were looking for somebody to fill that spot. So that's where I go at this point. Again, super early. The Tulo Tech mentioned at Tulo Tech, that's my guy. I appreciate the question. He mentioned the wing position, I think, and I don't think the Knicks can really lend anyone of consequence there. But I'll go back to Dallas. I mean, Najee Marshall, I don't know where they are with him, but if they decide to, trade off the Gafford types and the Marshall types, Najee Marshall is going to get a lot of interest around the league because of the way that has played in Dallas and what he's done throughout the course of his career. So that's a wing that I would keep an eye on, at least for as a realistic target for teams out there.
And we've got some time till those decisions are made. All right, the last one's from Sam from Freehold for Ian. Are the Mets going to re-sign Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso?
I think that's a good one for Pop. Pop covered the Mets for a long time.
All right, let's hear it, Steve.
Read on it.
I do think that as a complete outsider and observer now, I think that I think they've shown that you can't have enough pitching. So to me, the Devin Williams signing is great if he's the eighth inning guy and you're bringing back Diaz. That's what I would do. And Alonso, I just have a soft spot for guys who are organization guys and spend their career and achieve something there. You like him, like Giannis, you like to see him finish their career in the town that they were sort of raised in. So I'm for it. I think he had a great year. He bet on himself, and it's paying off. To me, I would do it.
Sounds like we should get you on the next breaking news for the Mets, Steve. I don't know. We might need a little cross pollination there. You might need it.
Absolutely.
I'm far off it now. Now I'm just sitting with a hot dog in the stands.
If you want to get Steve going, though, ask him where he'd rank Edwin Diaz on the Met closer list. Is it ahead of Billy Wagner? Is it behind Bill? Where is he? John Franco. That's how you get Steve going. He's passionate about that topic.
That argument has been settled with the Wagner Hall of Fame induction.
Steve was really pushing for it.
All right, that's what I got. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Spenley. Knicks Jazz Friday. Steve, will you be there?
I will be. Tired, but I'll be there. Getting a look at Lauri Markkanen, who is everybody's trade target, it seems forever.
Right.
When we talk about trades, here's the one thing I would do if I'm 29 other teams. I see Danny Ainge appear on my phone, and I just hang it up. Let it go to voicemail. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to give up the offer, the things that he's asking for. We've heard some of the crazy deals that supposedly he's asking back from Markkanen, who's a great offensive talent. The Knicks are not, I think, in the mix for that right now, and I guess enjoy him while he's here. I don't think we're getting him for 82 games.
No, I think Walker Kessler hurt. Obviously, that impacts his future, but they didn't sign him to the extension. So that's somebody who you could see teams calling and seeing how much Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge would be asking for. Nonetheless, we'll see the Jazz at the Knicks tomorrow night, and then they get Orlando Sunday. So big test on Sunday for them based on how things have gone against the Magic so far. That is going to do it for us here on the Putback, presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. Thanks for joining us here. We're going to be back with another episode Thursday. We're going to be talking about the NBA Cup. We're going to be talking about all things Knicks at that point. So be sure to keep an eye, keep an eye out for us there. And thank you, as always, for joining us today.